Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob, and things are really hotting up in the studio because we're about to talk about Fyreslayers. That's like a hot joke, which I think is super useful. I'm recording this video, like I always record these videos, when I do big, deep, analytical deep dives with the Twitch chat, where this is normally going to be a 4 or 5 hour video that gets condensed down into the video that you're looking at now. I hope you enjoy the video. Please do leave some comments because I've been really enjoying reading what people think about their faction and what they think, how it's going to work. And I want to thank the Twitch chat for being here and also everyone on the Honest Wargamer Patreon for helping support the show. This is going to be a video where we analyse all of the war scrolls, and we're going to do this without points. We'll be doing follow-up videos where we do tier lists, where we do list combos, where we do army archetypes and a bunch of other stuff in the future. This is just meant to be like, cool, what do these abilities mean? What combos could happen? And there'll be like much more crunchy, kind of like dedicated videos in the future. So I hope you enjoy them. So let's not mess around and let's get started. The first thing we're going to look at are the battle traits. The battle traits are your army special rules, which you're able to use. For Fyreslayers, you have the ability to do one, or you have the opportunity, to do one ability every battle round from a selected group of them. And let's get immediately excited. Fyreslayers players, build yourself up to the entire 4'5" tall you are, because you are going to be very, very excited. These are crazy good. So you choose these once per battle round. So you can only do one of these every battle round. There might be some characters that change that up or some other stuff as we get to it in the future, but for now, that's all you need to remember. Okay, well, what can you do? Once per battle, across the whole army, at the start of any turn, which means every turn, but it means specifically, because you can only do it once in the battle round, you could do it in your enemy's turn. So start the battle round, your enemy has their turn, you could do it in their turn, or you could save it because you might want to like trick them, whatever, so you could do it at the end of the battle round, you know, like if you go second. But either way, Rune of Fury, for the rest of the battle, friendly Fyreslayers units have strike first while they are in combat with an enemy unit that charged in the same turn. So in your opponent's turn, you can just say, cool, my whole army's got strike first if you charge me. I can't tell you how nutty that is. That's so good. So good. Then it gets better. Well, maybe this isn't better, but this is still good. If you use the Rune of Fiery Determination, which you can do once per battle in any hero phase, friendly Fyreslayers units have a 5-up ward save for the rest of the battle round. Also, that feels like a great counter your enemy's turn mechanic. Your enemy's set up for a double. They could be in a double where you've ended up getting yourself strike first and a 5-up ward save. Feels pretty great. The best one has got to be Rune of Searing Heat, where melee weapons used by friendly Fyreslayers units have crit mortal for the rest of the battle. Comfortably the best ability, where any 6s you roll do mortal damage, which punches through armor saves immediately. And it's every unit. It's not a unit. It's not a couple. It's not pick 3 units. Melee weapons used by friendly Fyreslayers units. All of them. Incredible stuff. Fyreslayers players, there's going to be a lot of Fyreslayer tourism, I agree. And then we've got Rune of Relentless Zeal. It's pretty good. You get to use run and charge ability. So effectively, you've got run and charge army-wide. I should also say army-wide. And then finally, Rune of Farsight, which is probably the weakest one, is you pick any number of enemy units in your shooting phase. So this is important in your shooting phase. Pick any number of enemy units within 10 inches of any visible friendly Fyreslayer units. Roll D3 on 2+, inflict that many mortal damage. So, you know, in the right situation, if you get like a bunch of enemy units around you, you know, that's a lot of mortal damage that's potentially happening to each unit, but it's not going to stack. So it feels like you're going to be able to run into the mid-board with run and charge if that's what you want to do. If your opponent tries to charge you, you've got strike first. If your opponent tries to charge you or even shoot, you've got a 5-up ward save. When you finally do commit to doing some big damage, everyone can have crit mortals, like Oprah giving out candy. Incredible allegiance set. You've got loads of choices. You can be reactive in your choice. You're not locked to it in the start of the battle round. You can only do one per battle round, so it's not OTT. Incredible stuff for Fyreslayers. As part of your battle traits, you also have, obviously, a terrain feature that you can use for your Fyreslayer force. And this is the Magmic Battleforge, also affectionately known as the Pizza Oven. It's got 8 health and a 3-up save because faction terrain is destroyable, as I delighted in doing yesterday myself. It's destroyable Therefore, if you do have any strong allegiance abilities connected to it, then you're going to have to protect it. Thankfully, the Magmic Battleforge gives you a bonus, but it is not a core element of how your army is going to play, like the Loon Shrine for Gloomspite Gits, which lets you return slain models. Instead, it has the ability to do a buff, and then also you're able to get rid of the buff to do a once per battle ability. So, Molten Blessings is the buff that it gives, where you pick a friendly Fyreslayers priest, which is effectively kind of a pseudo-wizard, and you add one to the chanting roll to the target for the rest of the turn. In addition, the target can use Unbind ability this turn as if it had a wizard. This is actually really excellent, because there's obviously, as we know, a command ability to be able to do prayers in your opponent's turn. There are also empowered prayers, and the way that you would empower a prayer with a priest is be able to generate more and more points. You generate points in your hero phase, but using the command ability, you can also generate those points in your opponent's turn. With an additional +1 to this means you're going to be racking up those abilities faster and the ability to apply those buffs quicker, which is actually really great. So more empowered prayers means a stronger army. So it's actually quite nice. It's just a small buff, but it's an additional buff. And then the ability to shut down wizards, I think do an unbind, is actually excellent as well, especially because there's going to be so many manifestations and other things on the board. Okay, if you decide to get rid of that ability, once per battle in your hero phase, you can expend all of the power of the Forge and heal D3 to each friendly Fyreslayer unit on the battlefield. And once this ability has been used, then you won't be able to use the Molten Blessing ability I just talked about. One of the things to say about this is, like, you don't necessarily have loads of wounds on your models. You don't have like a cavalry unit, which is obviously really sad, but you have, your big monstrous Magmadroth. So that's the situation where it's going to be more effective. So I feel like getting +1 to cast is good. Magmic Battleforge is there. That's great. You don't have to worry about it getting killed because you're like, oh, I've lost +1 to cast, like +1 to my prayers. Oh, who cares? So you're in a good position, which is nice. Nice piece of terrain. On your army list, you are going to choose a battle formation. This is effectively like a playstyle for your army. And this is something right on your army list if you're going to an event, or that you would pre-write on your army list before you're playing your opponent. There are 4 to choose from, and they are buffs that are going to apply across the entire game. So there are 4, and Warrior Kimbad is the first one, arguably the best straight off. +1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Fyreslayers infantry unit that charge in the same turn. Now, Magmadroth fans, obviously livid, but Fyreslayers are pretty much an infantry force. So +1 to wound, almost army-wide for charging, feels very strong. Obviously, if they're an army that's going to get stuck into ongoing combats, they're more of a bruiser unit with good armor saves, good ward saves, and they're going to be sticking on objectives, just fighting it out forever. It's not as effective, but +1 to wound can just mean you can deliver this absolutely smash alpha blow in the right setup, so that feels nice. But it doesn't stack with things like, the crit mortals, so, there's that nice dichotomy there. Bulwark of Molten Stone is +1 to save rolls for friendly infantry units while they're wholly within friendly territory, which I love. That's great, especially if, for some reason, the big bad in the game is some sort of alpha striking army looking at you, Kharadron Overlords, where they can bring all their shooting to bear very early. Early in the game, you're going to be in your territory. You can be like, cool, I got +1 to save. You're going to lose that later, so it's only going to be something you choose if it's a persistent problem, either at your local club or, generally in the meta as is. Scales of Vulkatrix is good for a specific army build if you're running loads of Magmadroths. Add 2 to the health characteristic of friendly Magmadroth units. +2 to the health is great. We love that. Rally works really nice, actually, for healing wounds on big monsters. Better than the heroic actions ever did in Age of Sigmar 3. So that's not as bad as it seems. And the last one I think is really good. Lords of the Lodge. Martial pride and stubborn will. You add 3 to the control scores of friendly Fyreslayers heroes. In addition, the control scores of Fyreslayers heroes cannot be modified by enemy abilities. This means if you just got your foot heroes, they're now control value 5. And if you are running Magmadroth, they're control value 8. You're probably going to end up with infantry lines with some heroes behind them supporting them, unless you are some of those crazy players who are just throwing Doomseekers forward. But either way, having control value 5 on your hero while the other unit is fighting and it being unmodified is going to mean those objectives are going to be much more likely to be yours, which I love. So, very good. Great faction abilities, great battle formations, and Fyreslayers players should be really happy. Next up, when you write your army list, you need to pick one of your heroes, doesn't have to be your general, to have a heroic trait. A heroic trait. These are the inheritance of Grimnar. And there are 3 to choose from. The first one is Blood of the Berzerker, where you add 1 to charge rolls for friendly Fyreslayer units, where they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. That's not bad, especially if you're planning to have some units that are popping up from Deep Strike. However, probably you're going to be fighting over objectives. I don't think it's going to be a major deal. And so that's fine. Next one, Ashbeard, I feel like will be the most common choice. If this unit is not a priest, they have Priest 1. That's pretty nice, especially obviously for additional manifestations on your unlimited, manifestations and also prayers that are unlimited. And if this unit was already a priest, you add 1 to this unit's chanting rolls. So already with also the Magmic Battleforge, we have +2 to our chanting rolls. So getting empowered versions of prayers is going to be much easier, and I feel that's going to be much more common. Next one is Fiercely Competitive, which I think is the one you'll take on a Magmadroth, where if this unit is in combat with its enemy unit, it has Strike First. This unit has Strike First, This unit has Strike First. If this unit is in combat with an enemy unit that uses the All-Out Attack command, add 1 to hit rolls for this unit's attacks for the rest of the turn. The problem, I think, in this situation is A, it requires your opponent to have Strike First, B, you have battle traits that already can make you have Strike First, and so probably you just default to Ashbeard. Also on your army list, you need to choose an Artefact of Power. Choose 3 to choose from, the heirlooms of the Lodge. The first one is once per battle in the enemy hero phase, you can use the Ash Cloud rune. Until the start of your next turn, friendly infantry units cannot be targeted by shooting attacks while they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. It doesn't matter how close the enemy unit is. Like, it doesn't matter. And that's nuts. You just come up against it like that. I feel like that's like just so you auto win the shooting matches. The others are good, but you're just like, cool. Oh, do you have shooting? I win. Anyway, next up is once per battle in any combat phase, you add 3 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. That's obviously really good if you're building a really big combat character. And then the Droth Helm, again, Magmadroth build, add 1 to the hit rolls for companion weapons, which will be Magmadroths, used by friendly Fyreslayer units while they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. So army-wide, +1 to hit feels really nice, obviously. But again, that doesn't necessarily integrate well with crit mortals when that does happen. So this is like a different buff at a different point. So I feel like you take the Ash Cloud rune every time, and then you're just like, cool, am I against shooting today? You can't shoot me. Feels amazing. You're going to pick a prayer lore for your Fyreslayers army, and the Zharrgron blessings are what you get. You have 3, and one of them is unlimited, which means each priest in your army can attempt to cast them in every single, in each hero phase. Well, in your hero phase. And then obviously you can use the command ability to try and either cast it or summon ritual points or generate ritual points in your opponent's turn. So the first one, Prayer of Ash, feels insane. It's on a 4, so if you've got an Ashbeard guy, it's a 3. If you need your Magmic terrain piece, it's a 2. Subtract 1. You pick a visible friendly Fyreslayers unit wholly within 12 inches to be the target. You subtract 1 from the wound rolls for attacks that target that friendly unit until the start of your next turn. If the chanting rolls in 8+, also subtract 1 from the rend characteristic for attacks that target that friendly unit until start your next turn. So you can make an incredibly survivable unit. Don't forget, we can combo this with also maybe giving one of our units a 5 at ward save from the battle trait. So -1 to wound rolls is massive, definitely massive. There's going to be probably some units that end up being pretty weak because they have those hitting on 4s or wounded on 4s. And when they go into their counter match, they just get decimated. So that's brilliant. It's cast incredibly low. And then -1 rend is always nice. We love that. That's really good. And it's unlimited, so you can have multiple... it's unlimited, so you can have multiple of your units affected by it. And in addition, it's until the start of your next turn, which means it's multiple units over quite a long period of time. So this is really survivable. You also have a lot of priests, so this is great. Next up is also on a 4 is the Prayer of Grimnir's Fury, where you pick a friendly Fyreslayers infantry unit wholly within 12 of the priests that's going to do the prayer, and that target can use 2 fight abilities this turn. After the first is used, the target can strike last, and if the chanting roll was 8+, also add 1 to wound rolls that target's combat attacks. Now, yes, sure, this is an infantry unit only, but Fight Twice is locked in some armies into like giant models. As an example, you have a once per battle Fight Twice on Shalaxi. This is the ability to make, sure, not necessarily a huge unit fight twice, just a single foot character, but you can do it in your turn. You can do this in your opponent's turn, which is pretty nice. +1 to the wound rolls is also really good, and you can just keep doing it. So that feels like that's really, really nice. And the last one, Wrath of Vulkyte, is again on a 4, and you pick a friendly Magmadroth holder within 12 inches. For the rest of the turn, battle damage, which is effectively it reduces how many attacks they have, does not apply. And then add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the companion's weapon. If it's an 8+, so if it's an empowered version, you add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's companion weapons for every 4 points of damage it has. So a really great prayer lore there, really good. You've got this way of making your army much more survivable, which we love. In addition, you have the ability to make 1 foot character just absolutely slap, which you could build some really fun builds around. So again, excellent list. So you're playing Fyreslayers. Guess what? You have access to your unique manifestation lore, the Magmic Invocations. And seeing as the points for those are free, and you get to just choose to have the Magmic Invocation as well as your prayer lore on your army list, you basically have to go out and get your Magmic Invocations or 3D print something similar, and you have to bring them with you because they're going to be massively impactful in the game. What do you have? You have the Fyrewall, the Zharrgron Flamespitter, and the Molten Infernoth. Now, the Fyrewall and the Flamespitter are set up within 12 inches. However, the Molten Infernoth is set within 12 inches of who summons it and 9 inches away from enemy units. There needs to be a very deep video about how manifestations work exclusively, but effectively you have 2 static and 1 mobile, and that's great. Having a mobile one is very good. Let's look at the summon Molten Infernoth first, because you've got to get a 6 to cast it and the other 2 are 4s. To remind ourselves, it's going to require a 6 to summon this, so it's going to be quite hard to do, but you might be able to get this out early. Set up within 12 inches of the caster, 9 inches away from the enemy, and the Molten Infernoth has got 10 health and a 5-up save because you can kill them in combat. You might not know that. It's also got a banishment value of 7, so priests and wizards can attempt to get rid of it. Moves 8 inches, which is quite nice, and it's also got an 8-inch shooting attack, which is good because it means the first time, well, it depends on who you are, good for the non-Fyreslayer player, bad for the Fyreslayer player. So it means when you first set it up, you're not going to be able to use the shooting attack. But that shooting attack is 2 shots, hits on a 4, wounds on 3, Ren 2, damage D3, and can shoot in combat, which is nice because you do want this guy to probably be in combat, but maybe there's an option where you don't. And like all invocations, it's also got a 6-up ward save for its survivability. But the Molten Claws is 6 attacks, hits on a 4, and it's got crit mortals, which means any 6s to hit are going to be a number of mortal damage equal to the damage characteristic, which is D3. But those 6 attacks do hit on 4s, which is, rubbish. Wounds on a 2, and it's only Ren 1 and does D3 damage. The important thing about this is that it's free. The second important thing about this is it's got, at the end of any turn ability, Flame Scarred, where you pick an enemy unit that had any damage points allocated to it this turn by this manifestation's attacks, which includes its ranged attacks as well. And then you subtract 1 from wound rolls to the target's combat attacks until the end of your next turn. So now we have a -1 prayer and a -1 to wound ability. So if your opponent has got pluses to wound, you're now making it so that they're going to be like -2, they're going to be +1, so they're still going to be -1. So you can really shut stuff down, and you're just going to do damage with it as well, which is nice. You can also use it to zone out deep strikes because it's a moving invocation. You can also use it to get into combats and do damage. Ultimately, it's great because its cost is free. The next manifestation we'll look at is the Runic Firewall, which is a static manifestation. It's got 8 health, 3-up save, it's got a banishment value of 7, and of course, that cheeky 6-up ward save. It's quite a long piece of manifestation. It's got quite a big width. And it uses its ability in the enemy movement phase. And the ability is called Roaring Runefire, where you pick up to 3 enemy units within 6 inches of its manifestation, so not wholly within, and you roll D3 for each target. On a 2+, you inflict a number of mortal damage, and you subtract 3 from the target's control score for the rest of the turn. Now, obviously, a really nice thing to do is just set this right up next to an objective. Is there an objective in the middle of the board? Plonk down the Runic Firewall. Now you're immediately messing with them, and every turn they want to try and grab that objective, they're taking damage and they're losing control value, which is really nice, especially if you went the way with heroes to build up your control score. But ultimately it's free, you can trump it on the board, so you're going to do it. The last manifestation you have is the Zharrgron Flamespitter, which honestly just looks like some Play-Doh they found. It's got 5 health, 6-up save, and a 6-up ward save, but it has a massive shooting profile of 18 inches, which is really long range. 8 attacks, 4s, 3s, rend 1, damage 1, and it's also got crit 2 hits. So when 6s to hit, are going to let you roll 2 wound rolls. It's also got a passive Magmic Blast where you add 1 to the hit rolls for the shooting attack if the target has 10 or more models, and add 1 to hit and wound rolls if it's got 15 or more models. So you could be hitting on 3s and 2s, rend 1, damage 1. And ultimately, it's free. That's all it is. It's just a guy punking shots at 18 inches. That's all it's doing, and just causing an issue for your opponent, which is lovely. So it's nice to have this in the deck, if you will, just to keep being able to pop it up and just be like, I'm going to just keep causing you an issue, which is really nice. So again, 3 excellent manifestations. Now we're going to move on to the War Scrolls, and the first one we're going to talk about is the Auric Runemaster, specifically because he seems to be so effective with your battle traits, where you use your different runes, once per battle, that he feels like he's probably going to be an auto-include. We'll have to see points and other stuff and army composition, but let's talk about why I think that. Initially, he's a foot character. He's got 5 health and a 5-up save, and he moves 4 inches. So slow, but Fyreslayers are slow. The important part is there is a level 2 priest with a 6-up ward save and also a hero, so a leader of a regiment, which means he's going to be able to put 2 invocations on the board. He's going to be able to do a bunch of different stuff. And level 2 is very, very powerful, in my personal opinion. So he's really, really strong. As effective as Lord of Change is as casting. And that's not following on my Lord of Change joke. That's just meant to be like, that's how impactful it is. Now, he has a passive called the High Priest of Zharrgron, where each time a prayer is chanted by this unit is answered, this unit gains a Magmic Power token. All of the prayer laws and also 2 of the manifestations are super low. So it'd be really easy to immediately get 2 Magmic Power tokens in your turn, as well as when you use the command ability in turn 1 to be able to get it in get 1 in their turn, so you would have a total of 3. So it's very easy to get 3. And the reason that's important is you have a reaction that you can do. So when you declare to use your Urgold rune ability, so this is when you decide, okay, this turn everyone has strikes first, or this turn I all have crit mortals. You can use the Master of the Runes. You remove 3 of this unit's Magmic Power tokens, but it doesn't say remove all of them. So if you did end up in a situation where you ended up with 4 or 5, you would still only remove 3, and still have the opportunity to be able to, generate more. So you can have a massive pool of these, basically. And if you do so, you apply an additional effect with your allegiance ability when you do it. So if you decide to give your army strike first for that battle round, then in addition to that, you get +1 to wound rolls for multiple. Strike first and +1 to wound for multiple units. Not a unit, multiple units, army-wide. That's crazy. Rune of Fiery Determination is when you would give yourself a 5-up ward save. In addition, you give yourself +1 armor save, which feels amazing. Rune of Fiery Determination, which is when... is that right? Yes, that's right. I've done that right. Rune of Relentless Zeal is add 1 to run rolls and charge rolls on the turn when you would give yourself run and charge. So your army is going to be crazy fast. Rune of Searing Heat is when you give yourself crit mortals, and you also add 1 to the rend characteristic of melee weapons. And then last, Rune of Farsight, where you would do a D3 mortal wounds on a 2+ on a D3 to units within 8 inches, gets extended out to 16 inches. This guy feels like an absolute auto-include. You need a priest to make your army work. He buffs your already very strong battle traits, and he probably isn't going to cost tons and tons of points. Absolutely incredible. Next character we're going to look at is also a priest, but this is a level 1 priest, so not as effective. It's got 5 health, 5-up save, 6-up ward save, is slow, but the important part about the Runesmiter is you're bringing this guy along because him and a unit in his regiment, so pick this unit and up to 1 unit in its regiment, and then you can set that unit in reserve underground. Then in your hero phase, you can use Emergence, where you pick this unit if it's underground, you set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield, more than 9 inches from all enemy units, then set up the other unit that will set up underground with it, wholly within 6 inches of this unit, and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. This does mean, because it's done in your hero phase, you can emerge and also still do some prayers, which is good, to put some prayers closer to your enemy or even to support the units around you, which is quite nice. Deep striking is great. Having a priest is great. We love it. Great utility for the army to be able to do so. Next character we're going to look at is the Auric Flamekeeper, and he's got an odd position in the army because he's there if you're losing heavily. Therefore, probably won't go into your list initially because hopefully you plan on winning at the start of the game. So the Auric Flamekeeper's got 5 health, 5 up save, 6 up ward save, 6 up Fyreslayer, and control value of 2. It's not important, really. But obviously, you could add +3 to that, so it's 5, which is pretty funny. His 5 attacks in combat at damage 2 is honestly fine. Like in a situation where you need it to charge in. The important reason that you take this character, though, is because of the Master Flame rune, which you do once per turn in your hero phase. If any friendly units have been destroyed during the battle, you pick a friendly Fyreslayers infantry unit holding than 12 of this unit. Roll dice. If the roll is equal or less than the number of Fyreslayers units that have been destroyed during the battle, you can pick one of the following effects to apply to the friendly unit. The unit can have a 5 up ward, you can add 2 to charge rolls, or you can add 1 to the damage characteristic. Now, obviously, the idea of adding +1 to the damage characteristic of these pretty beefy melee units is obviously great. However, you don't, like, I'm going to need, like, maybe, for it to reliably happen, I'm going to need 3 or 4 of my units to have died, and I don't really want that to have happened, if I'm honest. Maybe if I'm running a specific type of MSU build where, like, Doomseekers end up being really cheap, and I send 3 or 4 of them in to, like, die, fight twice, die, then maybe he's pretty useful. But probably, it depends how cheap he is. You know, he's got, like, an elastic mechanic in making your army better. I don't know. The buffs are fine. 5 up ward you can already get. I just feel like I already don't want to plan to lose unless I'm building in my army list. Next hero we're going to look at is the Battlesmith. 5 health, 5 up save, 6 up ward. Control value of 5 on the Battlesmith, which is amazing. Absolutely great. Especially because he's going to be near enemy. He's going to be near your units and up the front of the battle because of his 2 passives. The first one is the icon of Grimnir, where you ignore negative modifiers to the control scores of friendly Fyreslayer units while they're holding within 12 inches of this unit. Now, if you watched my OCR Bone Reapers review, you could see that we were starting to look at lists that were, like, reducing the control value of sometimes up to 13, especially against infantry. So this might be mandatory because some armies, or this unit might be mandatory because some armies are looking to reduce your control score down, meaning you can't control objectives. That's what control score is used for. Bard of the Lodge is another passive where if a friendly unit holding within 12 inches of this unit uses Rally, where you roll 6 dice in your hero phase as a command ability, you can make 3 additional Rally rolls of a d6. And that's great because this is going to be beneficial to both your foot units to be able to potentially bring back models to those units, or in addition, you're going to be able to heal some of your larger models, all of which are great. So hopefully the Battlesmith ends up being fairly cheap, but feels like you're definitely going to need one. Like, both of these are really positive. It's whether or not they're going to go into a game state where that is something that you need. The next unit we're going to look at is the Grimhold Exile. And Fyreslayers fans, put down your cup of tea, your paintbrush, or whatever you're going to do, and please pay attention to the screen because you're about to have an amazing time. 6 health, 5 up save. We're happy, we're confident. That's fine. Okay, so he's got 6 up ward save. Cool. He has an ability, we'll go with the first one, called Honor to Grimnir, which is once per battle in your hero phase. Pick up to 3 friendly Fyreslayers infantry units, holding within 12. You can reroll charges for the targets for the rest of the turn. Okay, it's in your hero phase, which means it's going to be in your charge phase. Everything's going to get in. We love that. But what if you hate Gargants? Can you do something about that? Sure. Because once per battle in any combat phase, which means you can do this in your opponent's turn, you can use the last light of the Lodge Fire, where you pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Importantly, it's a core ability, an attack ability, and a fight ability, so you're not going to be able to do and fight after as well. Either way, you pick an enemy unit and you roll a number of dice equal to the target's health characteristic. For each 4+, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. So if they are a massive monster model with 16 health, you're probably going to do 18 mortal damage. Sorry, not 18, 8. You know, you're going to do half the wound characteristic in mortal damage. That's pretty incredible. I don't know what else to say. And I know your brain is immediately going to Gargants. I can't wait to Glotkin. I'm just going to go and nuke stuff. And you're going to be able to. And I hope you have the most amazing time. That is the Grimhold Exile, coming to a tabletop near you soon. The next foot hero that we're going to look at is the Auric Runefather on foot. It's got 5 health, 5 up save, and it's got a 6 up ward save. But there is a way to improve that, because once per battle during the deployment phase, you can pick a non-hero Fyreslayers infantry unit that is in this hero's regiment. And for the rest of the battle, while the Royal Retinue is wholly within 6 inches of this unit, you can add 1 to hit rolls for that unit, for the Royal Retinue unit, and this unit has a 4-up ward save. Okay, +1 hit's fine. You can do that with a command ability. Although, in my opinion, you can be using command points for many other things, like being able to do prayers and also being able to countercharge. So, why would I really want to take this guy? Well, at the end of any turn, which is the end of every turn, he can use the Commanding Presence ability, where you add the current battle round number to the control scores of friendly Fyreslayers infantry units where they're wholly within 12 inches the rest of the turn. Now, we already know that with the Lords of the Lodge battle formation that we talked about earlier, so like the sub-faction rule, there's the way to add +3. This would mean that just on turn 3, the Battlesmith that we looked at earlier, who is already a control value 5, would be a control value of 11, because he's infantry at control value 5, he's adding 3 from Lords of the Lodge, and he's adding 3 from Commanding Presence. That's insane. So getting objectives off the Fyreslayers might end up being really, really hard before we even talk about some of the other abilities. So that's really nice. We're already talking about a lot of heroes. Are you going to get enough bodies on the board? Are the heroes going to be cheap enough for you to do so? We're going to have to work that out when we make the points video. But right now, that's a great ability as well to have. So going past the kind of like supportive units in the army and just talking about solo melee characters, we have the Doomseeker. It's got 5 health, 5 up save, 6 up ward, moves 4 inches, was slow, but it's got 5 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 2. But there's ways to significantly improve this. First, in the deployment phase, you use the Oathbound ability, where you pick an enemy unit to be the quarry, and you add 1 to hit rolls and wound rolls for attacks made by this unit that target the quarry. If this unit is destroyed while it's in combat with the quarry, you'll inflict 3 mortal damage on this unit's quarry immediately after the ability has been resolved that destroyed this unit. So that's not bad. +1 to hit, +1 to wound. So now we're going to be 5 attacks, 2s and 2s, rend 1, damage 2 against the quarry. But he's also got a passive called Runic Power, where you add 1 to the damage characteristic of this unit's melee weapons, while this unit has 1 damage point, and add 2 if it's got 2 damage points. So it can be 5 attacks, 2s and 2s, rend 1, damage 2, with the ability to get crit mortals, also the ability to add rend onto this unit, and also a prayer to make this unit fight twice. So we could very much have a Doomseeker with 5 attacks, attacking twice, so it's going to be 10 attacks, 2s and 2s, rend 2, crit mortals on any of those attacks, and damage 4, which is pretty nice. It's not quite as spicy as doing half of Gargant's mortal damage in, but as we've seen in the past, people have taken multiple Doomseekers to be able to just keep throwing them in like little missiles, and I think people are going to have a really good time with these. And so I can't wait to see what happens on the tabletop. Our next kind of melee hero is the Grimwrath Berzerker. 5 up save, 5 up health, with a 6 up ward save, which obviously can be improved in multiple ways, which we'll talk about in a bit. He has a Firestorm Great Axe, 5 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 2, damage 2. Rend 2 is super nice. We love that, obviously. And once per battle, in any combat phase, he can fight twice, and the second time he fights, he strikes last. So that's pretty nice as well, and we're not mad about that. In the deployment phase, he can use his Grimwrath Oaths, where you pick one of the following oaths for this unit to swear. I will guard them with my life. While this unit is wholly within 6 inches of another friendly Fyreslayers hero, you can add 1 to hit rolls for this unit's attacks and add 1 to the ward rolls for this unit, which means he's going to end up with a 5 up ward save, which is pretty nice, and also he's going to be hitting on 2s. Instead, if a friendly Fyreslayers hero wholly within 6 inches unit is destroyed, this effect no longer applies. So that's if that happens. Or he can choose I will not be stopped, where you add 1 to charge rolls to this unit and add 1 to save rolls to this unit while it's in combat. If this unit uses retreat or rally abilities, this effect no longer applies. So you're not going to be able to heal him for the benefit of just +1 save. So I think the reason you maybe would take him to be able to stand near a friendly hero and just fight on their behalf, which is quite fun as a champion. I hope he's cheap. Next unit we're going to look at is the Auric Runeson with 5 health and a 5 up save. It's got a pretty cool passive called Fearless Charge, where if this unit charges this turn, For the rest of the turn, you add 1 to charge rolls for any Fyreslayers infantry while they're wholly within 18, which is pretty massive. And we have been neglecting and looking over some of the other pluses to charge that exist in this book. And I think, just doing a bit of paper math in my head, there's something like, we're up to like +5 potentially to some units to be able to charge, which is not nothing on what is a fairly slow army, and the fact that you could have run and charge for a turn. So you can get some units across the board real damn quick, which is super nice. In addition, he has the ability called Dauntless Assault, which is a reaction to you declaring a fight ability, which just means that a friendly, non-hero Fyreslayers infantry unit can fight immediately after this guy fights. However, this guy cannot, if this guy had strike first for some reason, he won't be able to bring a unit up to the strike first step. That's called out in the core rules, so it's just something to remember. Also, if that infantry unit that he's trying to like fight after him has got strike last, you're not going to be able to bring it up to the normal fight step. So that's just an important bit to remember. He's also got anti-monster rend 1, which I guess is nice, but you've already got a lot of heroes now in your list. You need to take some bodies. Not necessarily certain the Runeson's going to be in that. Okay. Let's take those little tootsies off the ground and let's start putting these big guys on some monsters. The Auric Runefather on Magmadroth. So 14 health with 4 up save and has got a 6 up ward save. It's also a Warmaster as well, because there are no named units in the Fyreslayers book. Maybe that'll be something we see in the future. It seems like all of the Magmadroths have got a passive called Volcanic Blood, where if you make an unmodified save roll of 1 for a combat attack that targets this unit, you inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. Now, if you are able to improve their ward save so that you can roll quite a few 1s and then do mortal wounds back, that's fine. But it's going to be a limited amount of mortal damage you do back. So it's kind of like a nice bonus versus something you're going to play for. Now, talking about this as a melee piece, because that's what it is. It's not a priest. It's not a wizard. It's a hero, a monster. So it's a big combat piece with also an okay shooting attack that's 10-inch range, and it moves 10 inches. That's 20 inches effective. 4 attacks, 3s and 3s, which is genuinely very positive. Rend 1, unless it's infantry, in which case it's Rend 2, that does D3 damage. And I'm pretty happy with that. If I had multiple Magmadroths doing that Roaring Fire Stream, I think that's a pretty good combined profile for really messing around with my enemy. In combat, because he's a Runefather, he's got 4 attacks, damage 3 with a Grand Axe. The Magmadroth has got 6 attacks that hit on 4s and a damage 2, and the Blazing Maw is only 2 attacks, damage 3, but again hits on 4s. -1 to hit is going to be way more effective than I think people think. And command point resources for using them to +1 to hit might be quite limited, because you're going to try and use them for things that are more utility-based, like countercharging or even doing prez in your opponent's turn. So being able to make it so that there's an aura of +1 to hit like we saw earlier might be really beneficial. We'll have to see. We also know that we could have plus wounds onto this guy if we took them in the right battle formation. So it could go up to 16 health, which is pretty good. The attack profile is fine, though. I'm not stunned by the attack profile, and I'm also not stunned by their survivability. I just think it's, in that medium where things like Bloodthirsters have obviously got those 5-up ward saves built in. But thanks to your battle traits, you're going to be able to have strike first, you're going to be able to have 5-up ward saves. Feels pretty good in my opinion. So those battle traits are really going to be integral to make these units better. So don't just use the war scrolls to judge their value. In addition, they have a rampage, which you do in the combat phase, once per turn across the army. So if you have multiple Runefathers, you won't be able to do it twice. So you're probably only going to bring 1. You do it in any combat phase, which means every combat phase. And you pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. You roll a dice, and on a 3-up, you subtract 1 from the save roll to the target for the rest of the turn. This is maybe the reason to bring this guy along. You throw him into combat with a big unit, let's say Archeon or something similar. And if you haven't already had the Grimhold Exile do 1 billion mortal wounds, reducing their save by 1, as well as increasing your rend either through battle traits or other means that you are going to absolutely decimate some heavily armored units, which is really nice. In addition, he's got a once per battle ability that you do in your combat phase, where for the rest of the turn you add 1 to the attack characteristic of melee weapons used by friendly Fyreslayer units while they're wholly within 12 inches. So now you've got this massive one bang shot where you can just lift incredibly important units off the board because you're reducing their armor save, you're adding to the attacks characteristic that you've got here. Maybe you've popped the rune so that you're going to have crit mortals everywhere. super nice. I think he's a really good piece, really good tech piece in the army, and you've got lots of really good tech pieces in this army. So maybe he'll fight for his place. Maybe, you know, for his points cost, you're going to be able to have a big brick of something else that's going to do all the damage. But as a damage piece and also a force multiplier in the army, feels like he brings some really good tech. Next unit is the Auric Runesmiter. So this is our priest on Magmadroth. It's a level 1, power level 1 priest. So you're going to be able to do invocations or bring prayers with it, which is great. Control value of 5, as is all of the monsters, which is good. But if we take them in the sub-faction plus 2 wounds, we've got 16 health. If we take them in the sub-faction where we get pluses to your control value, then they're going to be control value 8, which is great. Anyway, the combat profile is very similar, as is the shooting profile, with the latch axe doing slightly less than the Runefather, only having damage 2. But, you know, multiple Magmadroths doing a ton of roaring fire streams feels like it's going to do a lot of kind of mid-range damage before you're either charging in or, you know, to finish units off while you're trying to do stuff. In addition, it's got the Volcanic Blood ability where it does mortal damage if it rolls any ones to save back at the enemy, which I think is good. Like I said, it's already a priest. And then it's got a great rampage, which it does in any combat phase, which means every combat phase, but it's only once per turn across the army, so multiples of this model won't be able to do the same rampage. So that's important to know. But the rampage itself is good, where you pick an enemy unit in combat, roll 2d6. The roll is equal to or less than the number of models in the target unit. Inflict d3 plus 3 mortal damage on the target. We love that. D3 plus 3 mortal damage is excellent. So that's really, really nice. And then also in your hero phase, without you get to choose an enemy unit. Sorry, you get to choose a friendly Fyreslayers unit holding within 12 inches. Roll a dice on a 3-up. You add 1 to the wound rolls of that unit. Now, obviously, that's an unreliable buff, it being a 3-up, and +1 to wound is good, especially as there's a +1 to minus wound, +1 to wound, -1 to wound kind of meta that exists against certain armies, so it's nice to have in there. There are other ways to get +1 to wound as well on certain units. I think all around, quite nice, but not quite the force multiplier that we've seen from before. So it's whether or not you want a very survivable priest, which you genuinely might want. The last one is our Auric Runeson on Magmadroth. Same thing, 14 health, 4-up save. Obviously sub-faction to improve either control or health if you want to, as well as give them artifacts. It's got the Roaring Fire Stream, combat attack, all the same thing. If you roll any ones for saves, do a mortal damage back. Okay, so what makes this different to the other guys? Well, first up, it's got the passive Vying for Glory, where each time this unit destroys a monster, you add 1 to the attack characteristics of this unit's ancestral weapons for the rest of the battle. And then Dominating Roar, which is good, obviously, but you know that you need there to be monsters on the board, so it's a situational buff, and you have to wait for monsters to be there to do the situational buff. And then you've got Dominating Roar, where you pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit to be the target. This is once per turn at the end of any turn, which means every turn, and it's once per turn per army, so multiples of this model mean you can't keep doing it, so you're only going to want to bring 1, where you pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit to be the target. If this unit has fewer damage points than the target, subtract 10 from the control score of the rest of the turn. This is, again, an enemy monster. Both of these are nice. They're like, I'm going to try and manage monsters, kill monsters. But we already know there's a guy that goes in and does half of a monster's health characteristic in mortal damage, which feels like that's going to be the play. He also doesn't bring any buffs to other units around it, and instead is a solo monster fighting unit, which is fun and definitely good in like a narrative campaign. But I wouldn't see how this integrates into a rest of an army, apart from the ability to have, you know, a unique monstrous action and bring more of the roaring fire stream. So yeah, pretty cool, but you know, it has its purpose, and that purpose is very specific. So the first unit that we're going to look at, the first non-hero unit, is the Warcry Warband. The Underworld's Warbands, if there are any for Fyreslayers, aren't in the faction packs, just to be clear. And the Vulkyn Flameseekers is a unit of 9 with one of those models being a Kindledroth. You can reinforce these like you can reinforce other units. You could have 18 in this unit. Each mon in this unit has got 2 health with a 5-up save and a 6-up ward save. And they're definitely an anti-monster tech piece with 3 attacks each, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1, and they have anti-monster rend 1, so that can go to rend 2. But ultimately, 9 models with 3 attacks is pretty decent, in my opinion. Or it's actually 8 models with 3 attacks and 1 model with 1 attack that does damage 2. But, you know, That's still 24 attacks. If you reinforce this unit, that's 48 attacks. And you can ping it, so these guys have got crit mortals, which feels really nice in my personal opinion. Now, in the combat phase, they have an ability called Drothmasters, where you pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit to be the target. You roll a dice, and on a 3-up, you subtract D3 from the damage characteristic of the target's companion weapons, companion melee weapons for the rest of the turn. Now, that's normally the big damage piece, big damage weapons that you have on a war scroll for a monster. So that's really going to debilitate their output, which is very strong. Strongest anti-monster thing I've seen so far is the Kruleboyz Monster Hunter Killers, but this one also feels like it's very, very good. Now, don't forget, in the core rules, it does say you cannot reduce a characteristic down to 0. The minimum is 1, the exception to that rule being rend. So it's important to talk about that, just in case you get too excited. And it does mean if you have multiples of this unit, you could go into different monsters and use this ability more than once. Not on the same monster, but on different monsters. So 2 Vulkyn Flameseekers. Right now, I like this unit, and I would be tempted to get a big reinforced unit of this and run around and have a great time, because it feels like it's going to benefit from a lot of buffs. Control value of 1, so it's not going to be great for it's fine for holding objectives, whatever. But feels like a really good unit, especially in a monster meta if one emerges. Next unit we're going to look at is, again, one of the unique units in this roster. It isn't just a frontline melee unit, and instead is their kind of short range or to mid-range shooting unit, the Auric Hearthguard. This is a unit that comes as 5 models, and you can reinforce that obviously to a unit of 10. Each model has got 2 health, a 6-up save, which is obviously pretty unsurvivable, and a 6-up ward save. They move 4 inches, so they're slow. And they're a shooting unit. Control value of 1, so not super great for holding objectives, but they're fine, same as everything else. Their shooting attack is a magma pike that's 12-inch range with 2 shots each. So unit of 5 is doing 10 shots. Hits on a 4, which is pretty yikesy. But wounds on a 3 is rend 1, is damage D3. And the massive bonus, in my opinion, is the ability to shoot in combat. Now, you don't necessarily want this unit to be be in combat, because it's not that survivable with only that 6-up armor save. But a reinforced unit of 10 of these is going to be doing 20 shots at an effective 16-inch range with move and shoot. That are going to do D3 damage, which is a significant amount of damage. In addition, they have a passive called Molten Bolt Rocks, where every 60 hit, so every critical, is going to subtract 1 inch from the move characteristic of the target unit down to half of the move value of the unit. So if they're movement 10 and you roll, 10 crits, you're still only going to be able to reduce it down to 5 inches, so half of it. Yeah, so each critical hito. Yeah, and you could put these guys into Deep Strike as well, put these into reserve with the Runesmiter, thank you very much. So you could pop them up, shoot them. I think that's pretty nice. You do have to remember that you will pop up in your movement phase, and then at the still in your movement phase, they're going to be able to do a redeploy and potentially move a unit away, which could be pretty tragic for you. But I think these are genuinely very interesting. It's going to be dependent on points, and if you're going to be able to keep them around and keep them survivable. And some of the allegiance abilities, the survivable allegiance abilities, for instance, 5-up ward, obviously benefit this unit a lot. But critical hitos and those other things, specifically strike first, isn't going to be really beneficial here. So Auric Hearthguard are quite interesting. I'd love to know what you all think about them. The next unit we're going to look at are Vulkyte Berzerkers. They come as a unit of 10 models with 2 health each, and there's 2 types of Vulkyte Berzerkers. There's Vulkyte Berzerkers with Firesteel weapons, and there's Vulkyte Berzerkers with bladed Slingshields. Now, the bladed Slingshields variant has got +1 to its save with a 5-up save and obviously a 6-up ward save. Again, control value of 1, but the fact that you can reinforce them to a control value of 2, you can reinforce them is pretty nice, so you can have 20. That's a big health pool. You've got the abilities to get ward saves, improve control scores, run and charge, critical hitos. That's pretty good. The bladed Slingshields are going to give you that +1 save, and they're going to make it so every time a model of this unit is died, thanks to Berserk Fury, you'll roll a dice on a 5-up, you'll inflict 1 mortal damage back on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. So that's what that does. Basically, they're a little bit more survivable, and if you kill them, then they're going to do some mortal damage back, but that's not loads. Now, the Firesteel weapons is 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, wound on 3s, rend 1, damage 1. There's no way to improve that. If you'd like to go for the other Vulkyte Berzerkers, which have a worse save, they've only got 6-up save, but they still have that same profile, 2 attacks, 4s, 3s, rend 1, damage 1. But they have a passive called Whirlwind of Destruction, where you add one to the attacks characteristic of this unit's melee weapons if this unit charges turn. So that's 3 attacks. And we already know there are other ways to get plus attacks on this unit. So you could get up to 4. There might be a way to get up to 5 if I remember correctly. Which does mean if it's at least 4, then a reinforced unit of 20 is going to have 80 attacks. 40 attacks. Wait, hold on. Unit 20 with 4 attacks each. No, that's right. 80 attacks. Unit 20 with 4 attacks each is 80 attacks. And you can have critical hittos on those doing mortals. So critical mortals, which is really, really good, obviously. There's ways to either reduce the enemy save or improve your rend. So that's going to be good. Pluses to hit, pluses to wound. You can do an amazing amount and a huge volume of attacks, which is genuinely very scary. So let me know which one of those 2 units you prefer. Of course, it's 81 attacks because of the champion, but pretty decent. Our last unit that we're going to look at are Hearthguard Berzerkers, and there are 2 types of Hearthguard Berzerkers. They are units of 5, obviously reinforceable to a unit of 10. Each mon in the unit has got 2 health with a 6-up save and a 6-up ward save. They move 4 inches, and each model is a control value of 1. Now, both of them have got 2 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 2. But the Berzerker Broadaxes don't have any weapon ability, whereas the Flamestrike Poleaxes do have critical mortals, which means any 6s to hit are going to do 2 mortal damage. They're both damage 2, which is great, and the mortal damage might be really good. And the game, or the meta, so, you know, people you play against or at events, we might end up with a game with very high armor values, at which point you're probably going to take the critical mortals over the Broadaxes. Either way, both units have the same ability called Duty Unto Death, which is a passive, where, while any friendly Fyreslayers infantry heroes are wholly within this unit's combat range, both this unit and those friendly units have 5-up ward save, which is pretty nice, although obviously you can get that through your allegiance ability as well, but it does mean you can improve the survivability heroes, which you really like. If you take the Flamestrike Poleaxes, the special ability and what differentiates them from the Broadaxes, apart from the critical mortals, is the fact that you can use Smouldering Braziers, where at the end of any turn, which means the end of every turn, you pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target and roll a dice. On a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. This is actually pretty spicy because of when end of turn abilities happen, because they're going to be done before control is claimed for an objective. And having seen this play out a few times now, there's a lot of mechanics that happen at the end of turns now across the different armies, and you can do some really engaging, fun stuff. And your opponent is going to do that as well, so that final resting for an objective could become crucial for this army. Ultimately, though, I quite like the Berzerker Broadaxes, specifically because of the passive that they have. They still can get that 5-up ward save, obviously, but in addition, their passive is Fires of Vengeance. While this unit is within the combat ranges of any damage-friendly Fyreslayers heroes, you add one to the attack characteristic of this unit's melee weapons. Considering we know that we can add rend and reduce saves in our opponent's army, that means that the 3 attacks that we've got based on the Berzerker Broadaxes, plus the other pluses to the attacks characteristic that we can generate for this army, means that we could swing a massive amount of attacks that either have critical mortals thanks to the allegiance ability, or they just have a huge volume of attacks with additional rend and also reducing armor saves to really punch through, which I think is fun as well. So that's everything for the Fyreslayers review, and I am going to need a bit of time to process it, but I think a couple of things. Number one, they feel like a very anti-monster army. That's how they feel, in my personal opinion. They feel like there's some, specifically, a couple of those characters feel very geared to killing monsters. In addition, you know, while they have an incredibly strong suite of allegiance abilities, and it feels like one of the characters is auto-include to increase the benefit of those, we saw a lot of 6-up saves across this army. Now, Battle Shock, if you're an Age of Sigmar 3 fan, is no longer in the game, so I don't think it's going to be as much of a big deal that they're going to get, like, you know, whipped through. And the fact that you've got loads of defensive abilities, sure, you've got 10 Fyreslayer unit of whatever type, and your opponent's about to charge them, well, you can ping the strike first rune so that anyone they fight means you're going to fight first. That feels like that's really beneficial and is going to elevate their survivability. But that's only going to be one battle round out of the 5. Therefore, those 5-up wards might come in pretty handy. We'll have to see. But there is some good damage from this army as well, with some of those units being pretty massive, like doing a lot of stuff. Also, I think there's some really janky, really fun objective control builds in here, with the ignoring negative modifiers, increasing all of your bonuses to ludicrous numbers, which I think is really fun. I think manifestations and also your priests are going to be really important and are going to do some crazy stuff as well. So I think it really feels like, and then you just have some very unique units out there just ganking Gargants on their own. So I got to feel like this Fyreslayers book is the most interesting Fyreslayers book I've seen, and also feels like that there's quite a few different builds for what is a fairly limited roster. And it's nice to see the shooting unit, the Auric Hearthguard, actually make a comeback. Are they good enough? We'll have to see the points. We don't know. But right now it feels like they're okay, which is better than they were for the last 3 years, which is great. So that's my review of Fyreslayers, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you to everyone on the Honest Wargamer Patreon. We have a Discord with faction chats for all the different factions, and because it's a private Discord, because you've got to be on Patreon to get there, I feel like the conversation is slightly healthier than you maybe would find in some public forums. In addition to that, you get to support the show by liking, subscribing, or doing any of those other things. You know, share the video out to people that you'd like. And of course, leave some comments so I can read them and let me know what you think. Thank you to the Twitch chat who've hung out with me while I've made this video. It's been super fun. And thank you very much for watching my videos. Thanks for listening to The Honest Wargamer. See you soon.